There's someone waiting here, hidden behind the velvet and lace. This is the Vampire Bride Chamber, a tiny world of shadows, secrets, and quiet romance. Every piece in this room has its own story, and today we're building them one by one. It's going to be dark, a little dramatic, and hopefully beautiful. So grab a cup of tea and let's start from the beginning. Quick note before we dive in, this is a detailed, beginner-friendly craft tutorial, all scaled for Barbie dolls. I'll walk you through every step, show all the materials and measurements, and if anything's missing in the video, you can find the extra details in the description. For our base, we've got the window wall on the right and the wainscoting on the left, both from my previous project, link in the description. Now let's get started with the fireplace. I've already cut the foamboard pieces. It'll be Victorian style. Here are the measurements. The proportions are chosen for an elegant, slightly dramatic look. Let's start assembling. I'm just gluing the pieces together with hot glue. This one will be the base. Now I'll add the inner frame. This gives it a nice layered look. It doesn't quite look like a Victorian fireplace yet. Let's add some details. I'll start with wooden dowels. Next, I'm adding clay pieces I made in a previous video using this silicone mold. I'll make a few more clay pieces. I absolutely love this mold. It instantly turns plain clay into ornate little Victorian motifs. Each piece adds a bit more story, a bit more soul to this fireplace. Now it's time to work on the surface. I want that plaster stone texture like in old manors, and it's easier than it looks. First, I'm brushing on some gesso, then using a sponge to create that soft plaster texture. Here's how it turned out. No brush marks, just a beautiful stone finish. Now let's make some color. I'm using a white, yellow, and burnt umber. Kind of like an egg with soy sauce. When mixed, it turns into a warm ivory tone. That color has a certain coziness, like candlelight on old walls. I'll paint the entire fireplace in this shade. Compared to plain foamboard, it already feels richer, more lived in. I'll add a little age now. I'm brushing thinned burnt umber into the edges and crevices, like dust and smoke that's built up over the years. Then a touch of white and gold on the raised areas, just enough to catch the flickering light, like shadows moving across the room. Finally, a thin coat of varnish. It gives a soft sheen while keeping that plaster time-worn feel. Now let's make the firebox. I'm using black foamboard and cardstock. I'll add a small handle, a little metal knob for the ash door, just like in real Victorian fireplaces. Next, I'll create some burning coals and logs. This panel will be the backdrop inside. I'm brushing it in soft gray to give it that ashy, smoky depth. Making a fireplace for the Vampire Bride's room, she probably doesn't need it like we do. But maybe she enjoys a soft flicker, remembering what it felt like when she was alive. Though, wouldn't the smoke and ash bother her? I'd be coughing a lot. For the base, I'll wrap it with marble pattern Gothic paper. Its warm gray tone will complement the ivory color beautifully. Now let's assemble everything. And for one last touch, a thin wire piece across the opening. It's like an old Victorian fire guard. The fireplace is done. Once it's in the room, the space feels warmer, even with its cold stone body. But the room still feels bare, like no one's living here. Let's add a few things. A green vase, a rose, and a skull. Just small details, but it's starting to feel like her space. I can almost imagine the vampire bride running her fingers along the cold stone. Next, let's make the vanity, the place where our vampire bride will get ready for eternity. I've already cut the foamboard pieces. I've sketched a rectangle that will form the bottom of the drawer with a surrounding margin that will fold up to become the sides. I'm cutting at the corners and scoring the fold lines, then folding to shape the drawer and gluing at the corners. Now I'll add the front piece and check how it fits into the frame. Let's make a tiny hole for the drawer knob. Small details like this make it feel real, like someone could actually tuck away her little secrets here. For the rest of the drawers, I'm only making the front panels. They are purely decorative, just for the look. Now I'll assemble the main frame of the vanity. Once it's all together, I'm priming the surface with white enamel primer. So far so good, but I noticed it was a bit too tall before painting, so I trimmed the bottom to the final size. Looks more balanced now. Time to add color. I'm brushing on a rich reddish brown to create that deep mahogany look. The first coat always looks streaky and rough, but that's part of the process. Each layer adds depth until it finally turns silky and warm. After the base color, I'm adding a wash with a touch of gold. It deepens the tone and gives that subtle romantic gleam when light hits just right. Then a few highlights and shadows along the edges. Painting's done. Now I'll apply a coat of varnish to give it soft sheen. Finally, let's add the drawers to the main body. While I was making this, I kept wondering what our vampire bride might keep inside her vanity drawers. Maybe secret notes, little potions, or experiments from her quest to reverse the curse. It's fun to imagine. It gives a piece a tiny story of its own. And here it is, our vanity complete. Before adding the vanity to the room, I'm bringing a bed first close to the fireplace. I made this from scratch in my previous video, link in the description. I'll add a red velvet cushion, a rose, and a bit of peach tulle to match the tone of this room. And a tiny wooden carrier underneath, maybe for her midnight picnic. The bed really sets an eerie, romantic mood. Next, the vanity finds its spot beside the bed, away from the fireplace. I add a lace scrap, a tulle runner, her little lamp, and a few personal treasures, just enough to make it feel like her space. And inside the top drawer, a few hints of her secret experiments. Tiny traces of whatever she's been working on, quietly hidden away. Together, they make this corner feel like her private world. You can see her there, brushing her hair in silence, waiting for the night to begin. Now let's give her a proper seat. For the chairs, I'm upcycling this little $3 chair from AliExpress. It has the perfect Victorian shape, but right now it's just shiny white plastic, very toy-like. Let's transform it so it can actually feel at home in the Vampire Bride's room. First, I'm sanding all the surfaces to prepare for paint. I'm using wet sandpaper so it doesn't get dusty. It's my first time trying this, and honestly, it's so easy. Why haven't I done this before? Next, I'll prime it with gesso. Even though I'm working on the parts separately, I realized later it's actually better to assemble first. Otherwise, the paint builds up at the joint, and I had to scrape it off later. I'm applying 2 thin coats of gesso, making sure the surface is smooth and ready. While that dries, let's work on the upholstery. I'm wrapping the seat and back in rich red velvet using super glue. Quite dramatic, perfect for our vampire bride. I'm adding a bit of polyfill underneath for a cushion look. Of course, my fingers got a bit bloody in the process. Please don't overdo the glue if you want to avoid these vampire hands. The gesso is dry, so now I can paint. I'm mixing my favorite egg and soy sauce colors again, white, yellow, and burnt umber, but with more white this time for a soft ivory tone, a little lighter than the fireplace. Three coats later, it looks like ivory wood. Now I'll add a thin brown wash along the edges and crevices to give it depth, a touch of beige like it's quietly been part of the room for years. After that, I'll finish with a coat of satin varnish, just enough sheen to catch the light, giving it a soft, antique glow. Finally, it's time to assemble. The footage actually turned out really satisfying, so I'll just let you watch and listen. Did you enjoy that? What a difference from something ordinary to something that feels truly loved. Let's see how it looks in front of the vanity. I'll add a bit of lace over the chair just to soften up. And these little shoes for her too. With the chair in place, this corner feels complete, elegant, and quietly haunted, ready for her nightly rituals. I'll put the other chair near the fireplace and add this rug, a cut piece from this dollar store throw. Its soft white fur and animal shape bring a quiet reminder of her true nature. Now let's see how a Barbie fits in. That looks great. Let's bring her a little closer to the vanity. All the proportions look just right, the height, the drawers, even the tiny knob. She sits as if she's already making herself comfortable, quietly watching the fire flicker. And here she's touching the cold stone surface. She fits right in. The room's not complete just yet, it still needs a few essentials. Let's start with the candles. To be honest, I planned to buy miniature candles for the room, but when I saw the price, I thought better to craft them myself using what I already have. This is just a dollar store LED light string, simple but it works its little bit of magic. Here I'm cutting off 3 lights from the end, which honestly was a mistake. I should have used the ones closest to the battery box so I wouldn't have to reconnect them later. Anyway, I'm shaping the wires into upper parts of the candle holder just like this. Next, I cut small round cardstock pieces. These will be the candle trays. Now I'm using hot glue to build up the candle holder arms around the wire. Then I'll attach this little miniature stand at the bottom, and that completes the structure of the holder. For the candle bodies, I'm using a straw. It's the perfect size. Let's paint everything. I'm painting the candles white and the holder in metallic gold. I was a bit nervous about making the arms with hot glue, but I'm really glad I did. They turned out a little strange. The texture almost looks like muscle fiber, and that feels just right for the Vampire Bride's room. Elegant, but with a hint of something unsettling underneath. I also painted the stand to match. Now for the candle tops, I'm filling the straws with hot glue, then adding wax strips around the edges. Once dry, I'll paint over them so they blend into the rest of the candle. And here they are, my eerie candlelights. Since I don't have a soldering kit, I'm peeling off the wire insulation with a knife to reconnect them to the battery. Not fancy, but it works. And it works beautifully. For just a few scraps, glue, and a bit of patience, we've created something that brings the whole room to life. I'll place it on the fireplace. Warm, romantic, and a little haunted. Exactly the way it should be. Next, we're bringing someone important to this room. The vampire himself, of course, watching over her with eternal patience. A bit dramatic, a bit mysterious, just the way I like it. Alright, let's tackle the frame first. Think dramatic, a little over the top. I'm using the same silicone mold as before. It's so detailed. And yes, I'm cutting wooden dowels again. This part is never fun. I'll glue the dowels together to form the frame, then attach the clay pieces. Those little clay details instantly give it that rich Victorian look. Once everything's attached, I'll paint it gold because what's a Gothic romance without a little gilded drama? Now let's make the portrait itself. I'm using Canva, just the free version. This portrait is AI generated, but I want my vampire to have a Ken doll's face. Yes, you heard that right. Ken, but make him undead. I start by cropping the photo to keep only his face. Then I adjust the color to blend better with the background. I'll crop again around the hairline and blur the edges so it merges softly into the scene. Finally, I'll apply a filter to the background. And here it is, the final image. He looks gentle yet haunting, and those icy blue eyes really feel like they are following you. Got me thinking, can I be his bride? You can even change the eye color if you want, a quick little trick to set the mood. Here are the printed versions. Let's compare him to my actual Ken doll. This makes me want to reroute his hair. And of course, I made a vampire bride's portrait with Barbie. Before adding the photo, I brushed on a thin coat of varnish. It already had a slight sheen, but the varnish added this beautiful vertical texture like faint brush strokes. Finally, I'll attach the portrait to the frame with double-sided tape and Barbie's photo to the smaller frame. The vampire's gaze dominates the room from above the fireplace, while the bride's tiny portrait watches quietly from her corner. Together, they complete this haunted little world. Let's make some books. I'm starting by wrapping a piece of foamboard in leather fabric. Then I'll add a bit of gold paint for detail. It looks a little too plain. Let's fix that. I'm adding a few strips of the same leather to create more texture, then brushing on acrylics to give it that aged, worn look, like it's been sitting on a dusty shelf for centuries. For the cover design, I'll draw a symbol with gesso. It'll dry erase, so when I paint it gold later, it has a subtle embossed effect. These are for the vampires to read, or at least that's the story I'm telling myself. Not my best work, but they fit right into the room's little world. Next, we're making curtains, something vampires just can't live without. Before we start, sorry for the poor lighting for this section. I'm using deep red velvet to bring even more drama to the room. I cut 4 panels. I'm skipping hemming the edges, just stitching along the top so they can hang on a curtain bar. You could glue them, but stitching just looks cleaner. I'm using a backdrop stand I already had to hang them. For the bar, I'm just using a simple wire. And that's how all the panels went up, draping perfectly. Finally, I added cream-colored lace along the top to give a subtle Victorian touch. Now I brought them into the room. It's bold, dramatic, but somehow calm too. Even though the color feels intense, the way it falls makes the room feel grand rather than dark. It's easy to imagine her world now, quiet, sealed away behind these velvet walls. Maybe she closes them to keep out the dawn or keep her secrets inside. Now let's set the scene. I'm adding a layer of peach tulle on top. This softens the color and adds some depth. Depending on how the light hits, it changes the mood. Where the light passes through the folds, it looks cool and sharp, and where it doesn't, it turns soft and hazy. It reacts beautifully to the light, perfect for creating that haunting atmosphere for our final scene. There's one last thing she'll need, her necklace. I like to imagine it was a gift from the vampire in the portrait, something she's treasured ever since. The red, like the blood and love intertwined, feels made for her. With her crimson treasure in place, her story is complete. From the flicker of the fire to the gleam of her jewels, this tiny world is alive with mystery, romance, and quiet elegance. Perhaps she's still there, watching the storm, lost in memories of a life once lived. Thank you for helping me bring her world to life. Until next time, good night.